And I do believe there's a story in here from that class, so yes. It was actually memoir, and the thing is I decided not to write a memoir as a part of that class because of just the structure of that versus the structure that I ended up taking with this book, which includes poems and short creative nonfiction. So while it is writing my own stories, it's in a different format than you might see in a complete memoir. So I'm just going to read an opening poem from the book, and I hope you enjoy. This is a little bit about my grandmother. Okay. I'm on page 1. Yes, golden bars. I know, when I'm in a reading, I like to read along, so yes. Okay. Golden bars. Preheat the oven. Line a baking dish with pre-cut parchment paper. It's the easiest to use. If you don't know how to bake, no need to worry, lovely one. This recipe is easy. Just follow the instructions. Pretend I am your grandmother who knows the secret to a simple life. When I was a girl, I used my easy bake oven to make cookies for my brothers. I learned how to be sweet and welcomed into a brood of men. So you'll need a mixing bowl and a large wooden spoon. Beat the liquids together first, then fold in the dry. This is a trick of the best bakers. There are things most men will never know. To make cookie bars, one way is the only way, but not in life. You can learn how to bake. You are from a long line of hardy women. Pour the mixture into the dish. Smell the sugar as the bars turn golden. Pull the dish out of the oven at just the right moment. Set aside to cool. Don't touch the hot edges with your hands. Don't say yes to marrying someone you know is not the one. Hightail it out of there if it doesn't feel right. When the lies keep coming, it's time to go. Pull out a fresh plate. Fill a glass of milk. You know what love is. This is just another way to learn how to survive. Okay. And then I'll read one more. This is at the end of the book, not the very last one. It's on page 35. And I wrote this, it was inspired by a photo of an owl that a friend of mine who does photography in nature, and she's amazing, Leah, what's her last name? Scott Beeler's wife, Leah, it's not Beeler, okay. Anyway, it's Leah F. Images on Instagram. And I was writing a poem in a class that one of the prompts was to write to a bird. So anyway, this is what I picked. Ghosts of the forest. You find them quietly perched on the edges of meadows or forest openings, nearly invisible. But when they hit you with their mesmerizing stare, their yellow eyes boring through, like human eyes in a feathered suit, it's like they know it's time for you to take a leap of faith. In this stage of my life, windows and doors are closing, and I am searching for an opening, a way out, like the time I was lost in the woods behind my childhood home. I was trying to find the creek alone because my brother wouldn't come with me. I was hell-bent on finding it. Lost, I frantically ran through the trees and brush to find the path to the backyard, until instead the creek appeared, but at a different point along the water line. I sat on the edge, catching my breath, when my brother suddenly, quietly appeared. And now, the deep, booming hoot of the mysterious Strix Nebulosa is calling me to clock out of corporate life, to trust the steps ahead. It's time to stop playing this soul-robbing game, to break through the hard, packed snow and forage what's beneath. I understand I am, as much as anyone, an endangered species, seeking a way to live in the midst of impermanence. I can only hope to navigate this closing act of my life with the wingspan of the great gray owl. Thank you.
Who goes by Randall James Tyrone and who holds an MFA from the University of Wyoming. He resides in Houston, Texas. His poems have appeared in Electric Literature's OK Panky, I believe I'm saying that correctly, Oversound Poetry, and Nomadic Press. He has been anthologized in the Bodies Built for a Game anthology by Prairie Schooner, my apologies. He has received a scholarship to attend the Tin House Summer Workshop and was awarded the Bentley Buckman Poetry Fellowship to attend the Writers' Week at the Idlewilds Arts Foundation. He was a finalist for the Indiana Review's 1/2K Prize and a finalist for the X.J. Kennedy Poetry Prize. He's very excited for you, and I cannot be more excited for him, and I'm sure y'all are ecstatic, so please help me in welcoming Randall.
Hi. Hello? Yeah, there we go. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to all the other readers. I'm very grateful to be here. Also want to say you should all take the food at the back. This book is novel in verse, basically just means all the poems are interconnected. So it is always weird to read small chunks from it, but I'm going to try to just hit highlights. I'm only going to read 2 poems. The first poem is the first poem in the book. It's called Sunflowers. Sunflowers. Sometimes, sunflowers grow out of the concrete. Sometimes, they grow about a 1 2/3 miles high, towering, over lawns, over houses, over projects, and over neighbors alike. Sometimes, at the top, with enough luck, God sometimes stops to answer the hard questions. My mom, elementary school young, climbed one once to meet God, sitting on furniture built out of holiday bullets fired into the sky. They debated what the other should want. My mom asked, "Will I have a future?" God said, "The past is all that is real. It has happened. The future I cannot speak." Then God lost their voice. My mom asked, "Why did the firefighters let my classmate burn to death in that car wreck?" God looked down at the city, through the clouds, to the parts outside the garden, looked past the white men in heat-reflective armor, past their jovial talk, to the black girl trapped in a melting cage, burning brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter still. Then God lost their sight. My mom asked, "Is life hard for you?" God revealed the crucifixion marks on their heart, 3 smokestacks blocking 3 valves, and a testing warhead in the side. Then God lost their mind. In the fantastical, whimsy can turn to horror faster than the passing of time between heartbeats. Sometimes, in this city, the one with sunflower skyscrapers, the one where my mom climbed down one to escape God, we still pray. The last poem I'm going to read is my attempt at a love poem, so we'll see. It's called Untitled Love Poem / Shoplifters. My brother's only advice for love was find a queen that steals, and I have found you. Take my hand, lead me, and I'll walk in your footsteps Down the aisles, my best man has blocked security's line of sight with blackness. Are you really going to support capitalism? Steal the marked up food. Call me when you're done. Hug and kiss. It's okay to make eating noises on one another's cheek in public. Nom, yum, nom. This will always go on too long for everyone. Love, I want to lie in the softest part of your thigh. Love, I want to know which of your armpits stinks more than the other. You laugh, and that's all I have ever wanted. The police are called. I get carried away from you. You, unsure with nowhere to go. The cardiac nothingness, the houseless heartache you realize has always squatted within you after I love you. Thank you all for coming.
So this is a linked collection, but it's lightly linked in that you can read any story on its own, but it's it's like Easter eggs. You'll recognize characters here and there, and it's really fun to see them. You know, you saw them when they were 4 years old, and then you recognize them when they're 40, and they're in a whole new place. These are stories of migration. Most of them are set in the Pakistani diaspora in Houston, but there are certain stories set in Dubai, a space. It's a liminal space. I grew up there. It's a very interesting space to write about, and it took me a while to be able to get into it, get into talking about it. And then some of the origin stories are set in Pakistan, in Lahore, the city, in the villages. So I'm going to try to give you a bit of a taste from that. I'll read the first excerpt from Houston. It's the one of this young lady sitting, do you know those outcroppings of rocks in Galveston? That's where I pictured she was. Also I'm not an artist, so I'm absolutely going to admit I used Midjourney to generate these images because I love illustrated books and I was just hungering for illustrations for my stories. So here she is sitting on an outcropping in Galveston. The story itself is called The Girl Who Ran, and it's the opening story of my collection. And here's a bit from it. Yeah. Oh, did somebody say something? No, okay. Okay, so this is from the middle of the story, and it's a moment in their home, in my mind, somewhere in the Montrose. Their mother let out such a wail that Adnan, who was home that afternoon, afraid that their father might have hit her, rushed to kick the door open. Their father had meted out beatings to his sons for their own good when they were young, and even Amal once, when at the age of 14, this is Amal, when at the age of 14 she'd returned at midnight in fishnets, mascara smudged, screaming, "Amy Winehouse is dead and nothing else matters." Adnan had gripped his arm that night and told him to stop, but their father had never hit their mother before. The master bedroom door smashed with Adnan's kick. Their mother ran out, tearing off her favorite apron on which she taught Amal to cross-stitch a feeble peacock. Her long, thinning braid flapping, she dashed blindly past Adnan and right into Amal. Amal, some primal female instinct overtaking years of resentful distance from her mother, gathered the sunken-faced woman in her arms and steered her into her own room. Her mother, who'd grown up sisterless, collapsed in the shelter of her daughter's embrace. She fell on Amal's bed and cried fiery tears. She wouldn't say what it was as Amal stroked her head, her back. Okay, so that's from that story. Thank
you. Last but most certainly not least, we have Christopher Flakus, who received the imprint Seaglin Camber Fellowship in 2019 and earned his MFA in fiction from the University of Houston in 2023. He has twice attended the Institute for World Literature, most recently completing a month-long program of lectures and presentations in Mainz, Germany. Known for his unconventional academic path, Christopher stands out as a creative writer among scholars of critical theory. He is a contributing staff member at New Square magazine, a Dublin-based literary journalist, and an active member of its Sancho Panza Literary Society, led by novelist Joseph Reynolds. He is currently seeking publication for his debut novel, My Life Among the Outlaw Poets, the books of death, life, and hope, a vivid exploration of the American Southwest and borderlands, blending myth, memory, and the voices of outlaws and poets. Please help me in welcoming Christopher Flakus.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. As was mentioned, Tayyba, we were colleagues in the trenches, you know, up and coming writers. Kathi and I had the pleasure of being a really great. That was such a great workshop class, and getting to know that a little piece made it into the book. That is so great. But I love that you took memoir, because everyone says write what you know, and I always thought, as opposed to what, you know, like that's kind of goes without saying. But write what you love. That's much better advice. But thank you so much for having me here today. It's such an honor to read. Aside luminaries that are both my friends and admired colleagues. My novel is I kind of broke every rule that I learned in the MFA. I had bad experiences with agents and with traditional publishing, and so I did the big verboten thing, and I went with this press that basically makes calendars, but they were ambitious, and they said they wouldn't, they would give me carte blanche to write what I wanted. And so I didn't really expect much more than, maybe I said 5 readers. If I get 5 readers that really vibe with it, worth it. I surpassed that like 2 weeks ago. The book's selling incrementally and is being adapted potentially into an animated show. So it's a far future but very recognizable. Just to catch you up to what the part I'm going to be reading. It takes place on I accidentally coined a term, Latino punk or Latinx punk. It's kind of like cyberpunk, there's science fiction, and I thought I was adding to this canon, and Kirkus Reviews told me that, you've coined a term. And I should have been happier, but it was kind of sad that we're Latinos we've never really been represented, and it's been nice to have the feedback that, it's good to see us win on the page as ICE, continues to just churn and become more horrible. So this is, without any spoilers, House of 10,000 Buddhas. It takes place in a space station prison, and there's a prison planet for the undocumented called Xochipilli, and it was hit with an asteroid, and that asteroid carried a spore of this blue mushroom that has created, it's like a hallucinogenic mushroom that's changed the balance. Anyone who eats it loses their hair, become kind of Buddha-like figures, and so the galactic economy is just ground to a halt. No one's buying future Temu, and it's really causing problems on Earth. So this is called House of 10,000 Buddhas. Calle Esmeralda heaved with the riot-armored bodies of polis. Ryu sprinted across the plaza, the sizzling bolts of last rifles trailing him, pockmarking the walls and occasionally hitting an innocent bystander, dropping them like a rag doll. Crowds began to throng together, angry, blocking the way between Ryu and his pursuers. Once he'd made it into the alley that led to his old safe house, his side bleeding and sizzling from the last shot that had connected, the thundering in his heart threatened to break apart his chest, and his vision went fuzzy. For the first time since Prater had dealt him the wound, Ryu felt aware of the searing pain in his side as the adrenaline began to slip through his fingers like sand through the cans of time. Ryu breathes evenly and walks with slow intent. He peels off his coat, blood-stained and tattered, shoves it into an open trash can behind a steaming grate. He thinks of the Chicxulub and his comrades, and by now, hopefully, they're floating towards Earth safely. He'd always wanted to see it, Earth. They were so close, the planet both of his cultures originally hailed from, each so different and distinct from one another, but he'd remain equally undesirable in the eyes of the galactic hierarchy and the primarchs that owned large swaths of Earth and emptied it of anyone but the most essential servants. He wished he'd been able to live long enough to see that world crumble for their sins. The star flesh would change everything. The flesh of the mushroom, Ryu scrambled at his pack pouch, bringing out the azure blue groundlings he'd cut from the harvest, just as sparks flew from the door and the police began cutting their way in. The mushrooms shone like opals in the half-dark of his hiding place, a blue luminescence coming from somewhere inside the mycelial organism. Suddenly another option appeared, a way to radically transform his appearance and gain immunity. If he ate it and became a prophet, he'd be immune or even unrecognizable. To be caught with even a crumb was an immediate death sentence. Once it had been ingested, though, he had a certain political capital. He was one of the monks. The process itself meant every other prophet was immediately made aware of him. There was no hiding it, and the authorities had no choice but to back off. They could arrest him. So he started to eat. Madre de Dios, chingada. Ryu surveyed what he'd gathered with shivering hands. Several pounds of bulbs, blue and plastic-looking, almost too clean, like glass, sharp, with gills underneath, dripping blue liquid. The galaxy's strongest prophet, Bruno Carranza, had only eaten a mouthful, and he transformed himself and civilization with it. Ryu did have stomach enhancements, nanomachines that might protect him digesting it. Then again, if they worked too well, he'd be back at square one. He needed the flesh to work, but felt afraid. At least he wouldn't be hauling these packs of it, and it was the only idea he had, the last he could make. Just a chingan, Ryu thought. He reached for a multi-stemmed family, a cluster of fungus, all of them attached. He popped the whole thing in his mouth and began chewing. It had a taste closer to shiitake and ash, and a gum and a spicy candy that he'd eaten as a kid, all mixed together with saffron and smoke. He opened his pack and began shoveling mouthfuls into his gnashing jaws. The police smashed through the door, but by then he had already left his body. He hadn't even spoken the word out loud, and yet it seemed to ring in his mind, all around him, audibly. Everything began to dissolve, go blue, tinged in webbed currents of energy, ghostly and pale as a spider's nest. He kept shoveling in every last piece, his jaws chewing, even as the police came in and pulled his arms behind his back. He hung on to the need to do this as he felt himself going. So fast, he thought. He felt an uncontrollable need to laugh, but clasped his hands behind his leg and felt the click of handcuffs. He didn't want to accidentally set anything off if he lost control. His head felt as if pure helium were being introduced at the stem of his brain. Several days' worth of adrenaline injectors all aboard a spacecraft going at once. Suddenly the ground moved very fast, and then there was no ground, and all at once the sensation that couldn't be compared to anything before. Then up, up, and up. Thank you so much.
I want to pick y'all's brains about when approaching your manuscript. How did your personal experiences influence that? Was it based in and around those experiences, or was it kind of from the outside looking in somewhere along those lines?
So, I think the first thing I want to say about intent is I think you as artist or writer, whatever, you kind of owe the reader truth. You don't owe them facts. And the difference being that the truth is more of a structured and digestible, like the meaning is attached to the information. Facts can be misconstrued or like applied to pretty much anything, right? So like a example, right? Like a fact is this country's constitution has all men are created equal in it. The truth is we know that is not applied or exist in our realities. So when I think about that and towards intent, when I'm writing, I do have goals, or like I kind of start from the position of very large idea that I want to get across, and then the writing itself is building the framework to hold that idea. So like if you think of it as it's closer to building a functional dam in the sense that the idea is the running water and the framework being the dam itself that like funnels it into something useful, if that makes sense. I'd have forgot the question already.
Very good.
That's so interesting, Randall. I think for me, it's the opposite. I think the bigger idea emerges out of the story that starts to build. I think the question I'm always asking is why we behave the way we do. It's all about character for me, and but my characters will come out of a situation that stays with me. I always call it taking note of the thing that makes you look again. You know, you see a sock on the sidewalk, a baby sock, and you're asking, how did that end up there, and why did the dad not pick it up? You know, and then something just grows out of that. The character does, and then having these characters sort of just exploring their psyches, and hence just creating these new human beings, as just from what I have now understood in my many decades of what it's like to be human, but continuing to sort of ask that question. So as far as personal experience, again, for me, that just comes in as nuggets for my stories and my collection. There are several stories that have emerged out of family history, but only as a starting point. But then there are stories that came out of, I have a character, you would never guess who when you read the book, but she's based on Ahab out of Moby Dick. But she's a woman in a village in Pakistan, and to me the nugget was Ahab disguising his madness as a mission. And that's what she does. She's accused of being mad. And she embraces that. So that's me.
Well, that is, I feel like responding really quick to both of you because as far as characters go, this is my first time ever experiencing a character that was fully formed in my head, and now I have responses from people that are saying like, why can't they have been together, or they feel the love story? And I thought, wow, I was scared it would be saccharine, and they kind of do take on a life of their own, and it's almost like they introduce themselves to you, and they're there, and it's just up to you to make them as real as they seem to you to other people. And to that, I kind of reiterate that you got to write what you love above write what you know, because personally, like, of course, we're going to write what we know. But for this project, intent was everything, because I had bad experiences with traditional publishing, and I feel like we're going through this flux right now because academia is crumbling, the country's in kind of dire straits, and yet the biggest growing group of readers are 15 to 25. So there is definitely hope, and don't let the naysayers tell you that writing is dead, poetry's dead. Like that's. They don't even read. What the hell would they know? So, but I come to events like this and I see them well attended, and I see that there are serious readers of all kinds of genres. So my intent behind this was to write a genre piece, science fiction specifically, because it was my first love as a child, and I feel like it's the last contested literary battleground where there's a highly white, male-dominated fanboy kind of thing, and just by changing the representation a little bit, I get a lot of hate mail, and for me, that's like a great review. If I'm making a sensitive little, because I am totally Caucasian, pero soy mexicano al mismo tiempo, and like a lot of people don't understand that Mexico is a boiling pot too. We have people from all over the place, a huge Korean community, and so Xochipilli, the planet, that's why like my main character is Raul Ruiz. It's like the syncretism of all of these diasporic communities. So the intent was to make a far future that is really a reflection of today and hopefully be a call to arms.
That's awesome. Thank you all. I think, with my book, I didn't intend to actually write a book. So the fact that it evolved into that is pretty exciting. The intent that I have when I'm writing is to sort of excavate my life and look at what I've learned, and then take that to kind of a larger scale, because I'm also very curious about human behavior, and my background is in human resources, so I'm like all about people and all, just that curiosity and sort of why we do the things that we do, but then also why did I do what I did, and what were some of those choices, and then what did I learn from that. But as I was putting the collection together, I worked with a writing coach, and she was very helpful for me to even see that there was an arc, I guess, in this book that was meaningful. And a lot of poets will title their their book, after a poem or story in the book. There's a line or there's something that's in the book that they then title the collection with. And I don't have the line, "Consider the light," in the book. But it's the feeling that I hope that my readers get in reading it, that there is always light, there's always hope, there's always a way out, and to keep exploring that. So that was my inspiration.
Thank you all so much. And that's why I say that intent is a really big question, because I think there's a lot of different ways that you as an individual can approach the same question depending on the day or the period of writing that you're in, the season of your life per se. And hearing how y'all visualize yourself within the context of your own work is not only beautiful, but very intriguing. And for me, it next invokes the question of form. Each four of you have taken on different forms: short story collection, poetry collection, long form. And I'm curious to hear from y'all about how your intent or the process of writing or external factors influenced the way in which you choose to deliver this story, because there's you can make 1,000,002 decisions on how to tell a story, and I want to hear from y'all about what led you to where you are with this manuscript.
We'll start at this end. Okay. I love that question because that was something that kind of evolved for me as well, is that I was writing a lot of poetry. Well, my coach is Kate Weiss-Orcutt, and she teaches a lot of classes, and a lot of people in the Houston community know Kate. I take poetry classes from her, and I've taken creative nonfiction, short. I've also taken some flash fiction classes, which I'm really curious about fiction, but I haven't gotten there yet. But anyway, most poetry collections are all poetry. And when I wanted to introduce the short story into my collection, Kate was like, well, you really want to think about that, because when somebody is writing or reading poetry, they're expecting the next page and the next page and the next page to be poetry. So when you put a story in there, that maybe could pull the reader out, that kind of thing. And so what I thought, though, was I really fought for that, because I thought these stories fit into this arc that's evolving, but what can I do to make the story short, but also break it down? So when you talk about form, I have little header or what are they called, chapter breaks or whatever. Yeah, chapter breaks with titles for almost each paragraph in each of those stories, and they're less than 1,000 words, so they're short. They draw you right in. They're one aspect or one story that's in there. So it is a mix of both, and I hope it works. I hope you all enjoy that. It was fun to put it together like that and not have to think that it, can only be one thing. I could make it what I wanted. So.
I was really curious about that, because that seems like a magic trick to be able to pull that off. But I can think of authors that have done mixed media images, and I think there's so many rules in an MFA that they're meant to be subverted. As far as my book, I for two reasons, chopped them down into novellas, so it's a quartet of novellas instead of a regular length 350-page novel. And that was for two reasons. One, I won't lie, monetarily, because like Roberto Bolaño, when he was dying and writing 2666, he wanted it to come out and so he could maximize the money for his family. But I also really love Yuri Herrera. He's a writer who comes so close to kind of almost like Latino futurism, but he's still kind of in the magical. He's sui generis, which you can't beat. But he works at Tulane, and every day I wake up with a copy to drive. I chicken out, so maybe next week I will. But the small length is a tribute to him and Enrique Villamatas, and a lot of Latin American authors, and novella has kind of taken over as the form there. So it's both of those things, and also I think it can be more cinematic that way, and blocking your characters is something that people often forget to do, but I just kind of think of it like a film: who's where, what's around them, what are they smelling, what are they, sensory detail, all of that. But I agree with Tayyba that character is king. I mean, if you don't have characters that your reader feels something for, then you're dead in the water.
Thank you. I love that. Yuri Herrera, I was going to say he was here within print last year, and he rocked. Definitely look him up. So I guess as far as form, for me, in my book, Why a Linked Short Story Collection, these stories were not initially, several of them, the first third, maybe half of the book was not written in a linked form. But what started to happen as I was writing is that, these are stories of immigrants, and there's a pattern of immigration that is very natural that I've, and for my family as well, from Pakistan out to Dubai out to the U.S. I'm here in Houston, and it seemed to me that my characters in Houston had this migration pattern in their history, but I was already writing a story set in Dubai, and I wasn't yet thinking that these were the same people. And then, I don't know if you've read Yoko Ogawa's Revenge, 11 Dark Tales. If you haven't, please read it. It is one of the most brilliant short story collections. And what she does is those stories are linked. They're not chronological, because I did not want to write these stories chronologically. They were not. That didn't interest me. It wasn't like this person grows up and becomes. These were just independently written character explorations. But what she does in her collection is these stories. I almost call it like a four-dimensional Klein bottle of a collection. Her stories are linked not just by character, but sometimes by situation. Like you'll see a character stuck on a train in snow and not able to get off, and that's what the story is about. And then there's another story where a stuck train is mentioned and something else is going on in someone's life, completely different, but was disrupted by the train that was stopped. And it just blew my mind that you could, link things that way. And once I saw that, it suddenly became clear to me that, yes, my stories are connected, but they don't have to be connected through people. But nor do they have to be connected by chronology. And so I think the other day someone asked me, so then what's the organizing principle for your collection? And I realized that what it is irony. So I'm hoping when you read a later story and you recognize a character from a previous story or a situation, it is in an ironic way, like something is revealed to you where it's an aha moment, a moment of realization, or just a moment of wow. So, yeah.
So, form-wise, the book has maybe 2 poems with punctuation in it. Initially, the idea was I felt punctuation was getting in the way of training the reader how to both read the poems and how to be more in control of how they are emotionally affected by certain things. So like when you have a particular line enjammed or enjambment being two separate ideas meshed into one line. So like it does read as coherent thought, but it also reads on its own in a particular poetic line. Emphasis is a lot easier to control, particularly when working in like a lyric narrative mode, right? But also, as the book got restarted many different times, I was thinking of how do I emotionally guide a reader through this narrative and get them to an endpoint that kind of like makes what I'm saying more effective or more easily to accept, right? So like in earlier versions, it was pretty much divided into 3 sections. It still is divided into 3 sections, but like the focus was more so on like the first being the death of like the physical form, the death of the body, like what kills the body essentially, and then the second being what kills the spirit, and then the last being like navigating existence where both of those things are severely wounded in some way. And then thinking about like setting as character was a major part of the process. Often poems you often run into people saying, oh, your poem really starts here, and it's because you spend so much time building like an environment for readers to understand. But over the length of a book, you kind of don't have to do that as much if you create setting as like a physical character in some ways. Like they understand that like the characters are emotionally changing, or the speakers, the personas, whatever you want to call them, and that the maintaining beat through the entire book, the same like continuous motion is the setting, right? Like the place isn't changing, the place is changing the people. And I thought that was a lot easier to do in a linked poem format than it would have been in other things. And also like, you know, what are you skill-wise able to accomplish is a big portion of that too, right? It kind of dictates how you can navigate these things.
Thank y'all. Thank you so much. Skill is, I don't know, the more that I write, the more that I witness, the more that I find that skill can be a more subjective term than I think. But the commonality that I hear amongst all y'all is in choosing form, there is there's almost a pressure to stick to convention, stick to what you've been taught, whether it's through an MFA, whether it's through what you're exposed to, what you read. And I like that each of you talks about breaking form in a way that is productive to the narrative that you're trying to convey to the reader. I think that it reveals more layers and layers of intent behind y'all's work that is not only insightful for me, but inspiring. It makes me want to succeed in the same way. And I'm sure any other member of the crowd can, especially if you don't write conventional poetry or conventional fiction or what like. Speaking of y'all, thank y'all so much for listening. I would like to open up the floor to y'all for a couple questions if y'all have any pressing ones for our authors. Thoughts on the matter? You.
I always like to ask, like a timeline, like, how far back was like the first nugget of the story? Like, I've been working for years, decades, maybe a couple months, like, going to the first note that you jotted down, how far back do these stories go?
Good question.
I love that question because I have stories that were written over maybe 7 or 8 years, because I started with a question about a character in a situation, and then I got to one point and they didn't know what to do with themselves. And I just had to stop. I have other stories that were, like, their draft was written in 3 days. And it's one of my longest stories. Of course, I improved on it. That is not the version you see here. But that's because the character kept going. And I think with that first story, what I found I needed to do was I was writing that in third person, And what stopped the exploration was that my narrator was too snarky and was judging this character, and that got in the way of understanding the character. And so I rewrote that from the first person. And so here was the same flawed character, but you were hearing from within them. But it took me years to realize that that's what I needed to do, because I resisted that. I just wanted to push forward, and it just never would go anywhere. So, yeah, I think when you find a way, at least for short stories for me, or any fiction, to let the exploration continue is when it continues. But yeah, there's no particular time frame for that.
I feel like I have a really good answer for this, because I was an undergraduate in 2007 in St. Edward's University when I wrote a short story for one of my first creative writing workshop classes. And it was essentially this, with the ending being the only thing that stayed, because my professor, Doug Dorst, great writer, he's the head of the, I think, University of not UNT, San Marcos. Texas State. He's the head of Texas State, and at the time he was just a professor of creative writing. And I give him this really trippy science fiction book about people eating mushrooms, and he just says, "Whatever you need to do to get to that ending, just the rest of it, just that ending." So I kept that in mind, and I really never expected it to catch, but I wrote it during the Biden administration, and it came out right in the middle of all that. So it kind of ended up being the right ending in the right time, yeah. But that was 2007, so it's a long time cooking.
Okay. Yeah, my book is 36 pages, so a chapbook is less than 40 pages. So what they're writing is like, to me, it would take so long. And that's okay. I mean, I think when you're developing characters and you're developing a story like that, I've heard from a lot of authors that it does take a while for that to formulate and to kind of go through these iterations until it kind of comes together. For what I wrote, the reason I started working with Kate was because at my age, I'm not going to go back and get an MFA. I have a master's degree, but it's not in writing. But, it was like I wanted to pursue writing, and I wanted to pursue it in a way that I could gain the experience and the knowledge that I needed to do it well. So I just basically worked with her essentially on my do-it-yourself MFA. And when you go through that program, you have a capstone, you write a book. So it was kind of a natural thing to get there because of what we were doing. And so it took about 2 years then, I think, all in, to have the stories and the poems and the things that fit together. And one thing that does take a long time, I don't know about y'all, but getting it published, getting somebody interested in it, that they want to put their name on it and publish it through their press. So I started sending it out, and it took, I think, a year before it was picked up. So you think about, I wrote that book, and then I started submitting it, and I was writing more things. So I almost had forgotten a little bit about what I had been working on, because that was sort of behind me, and now I was working on the next kind of new thing. So I think as writers, we're always thinking about our craft and sort of putting things out there. And I think I would encourage that, because you never know what it's going to come together as, but just keep doing it.
So this would have been fall 2014. The first semester of my MFA, I kind of felt like I was being misunderstood, or like I couldn't get a point across effectively, is how I was feeling in those workshops. So I started writing poems that were solely for the workshop and turning those in, and then writing on the side what I actually wanted to write. So by the end of that semester, I had it's hard to even call it a version of this book. So then I get to the last semester of graduate school, and my thesis director was saying to start over. So I started the book over at that point, or one of the books over at that point. And then in between that time period, I lost, like I had multiple hard drives, like brick basically. So I didn't have those versions of the book anymore. So I essentially started over around 2021, 2022. Like the versions of the poems in that book, I had to like re-download them from like the magazines that had published them to see what they even were, before I like wrote whatever it is ended up in the book. So that's kind of like a difficult question. So I guess like the version you were reading in that book started in 2022 and got accepted the next year in 2023. Yeah.
Very insightful. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Keish, for the question. I think that it's a really, what's the word I'm looking for in this scenario? I think inspiring is a good word to hear about how sometimes long y'all have been cooking with this idea and how the process went for you between losing access to earlier versions to having an idea in your head since 2007, you said. It's something that I personally, and I'm sure people in this room can relate to, get caught up in with process, feeling like it's taking me too long, and let these 4 people before you be a testament to how you can do it too, and that's wonderful. Anybody else have a question? What's up?
So you guys talk a lot about like the form and how long these books are taking to come out. Now that they're out, how do you feel about how people are perceiving them, your intended audience? Maybe your intended audience is different from who's actually reading your book. I'm just interested in how you guys feel about your book now being out to the world and like in the hands of others.
Thoughts?
Well, I think it's just very exciting, an exciting journey, and then to have it in people's hands and have them share with me that it's meaningful for them, and whether it's one thing I wrote or the whole thing, you know, that it maybe had an impact for them, and you know, that they enjoyed it, is what means the most to me. I mean, it does feel like it's I don't know, it's like, it's really kind of crazy to have that as like in print, and then you know, to kind of get the box of books and open those up and just have that experience. I never thought it was possible, and it's happened. So yeah, it's very exciting.
I can still relate to that. I it was overwhelmed. I still am every time I hear from someone that isn't a family member or friend that I said, please review the book online. At first I was asking for that, but now there's, you know, both negative and positive attention. Like I mentioned, the science fiction's a male-dominated, mostly white genre, and so that's changed radically. Now really the vanguard, or like Becky Chambers, I can think of as they're mostly women of color. Octavia Butler is getting her due, and a lot of there's like a lot of re-examining of like Afrofuturism and new wave sci-fi from the 70s, which was really literary, and I feel like today relevant because of technology and the intersection between the human heart and this rapidly changing technology. And I just wanted to piss off the right people and make the right people feel represented. So it seems to be doing that. And yeah.
I look forward to all those feelings.
I don't know, because like the launch for this book is the 28th of this month. So like the people who bought books today and maybe like 10 other people are the only people who have this version of the book, right? So I haven't really gotten any feedback yet. So we'll see. I'll let you know.
Well, then in the case of these two, please be sure that when y'all finish reading your copies to go online or go wherever you may be able to and let them know what you think. I'm sure they would love to hear it. I'm sure they would appreciate the support. And the same goes for Kathi and Christopher. Even though their books are already out, I'm sure that any opinion or insight is welcome. Anybody else? What's up?
Back to the question of form and genre.
So genre is this dirty word in MFAs. It's we're science fiction. We're called the golden ghetto because we make the most money. But we're to borrow the words of science fiction writer Bruce Sterling from Texas, from Austin. He lives in Germany now, but he said that if poets are the arbitrators of truth, then genre writers are the court jesters. And we can get away with kind of, our pulpy background makes us a little bit more innocent, so we can mock authority. And like Don DeLillo said, all great writing is writing against power. And I think that since the new wave of science fiction, which wasn't about technology will save and solve everything, and it was more about, social issues, gender, race, sexuality, and like early 70s, like really, really concise. A lot of conversations that I thought were just beginning to happen were happening in this kind of overlooked literary realm. So I've kind of got a block against fantasy. I mean, I read J.R. Tolkien when I was a kid, but I think that as readers, you need to read eccentrically and widely. And so, any submission that says no genre, or whatever, it's like, I feel like that you're just kind of closed off because something could blow your mind and it might have a robot in it, and you're just going to have to get past that. Well, I'm so sorry.
No, I just wanted to add, I agree, I read a lot of books, and I love reading books that break genre. And so one of the things that I know when I was looking for a publisher, I wanted to find someone that supported those types of books. And so there are publishers that publish hybrid. So I was looking for that in my submittal. And then I've also seen that they're more willing to take that. But the question I think that you're saying is but also when do you know whether you want to do that or not? Do you want to write a more traditional book, or do you want to write it differently? And I think that comes from the individual and sort of how you're seeing that work. And I encourage play. I encourage trying different things and diversifying your readership, the people that are reading your stuff and giving you feedback. Make sure that they're not all looking for a certain thing, but that they're looking for the different thing, and that they've got those ideas and they encourage those ideas. I would say, yeah.
I think one genre, particularly in poetry, in the last, in the rise of the MFA first book expectations since 2016, right? When thinking of my book, one, you shouldn't write a novel in verse at all, right? Probably, and you definitely should not write it for a first book. Just because the leeway you're given, right, by publishers, have you earned this supposed clout to justify them making this decision to publish whatever, right? But in the idea of breaking of genre, I think for the last 10 years, it's been highly discouraged, right? When you think of the most popular, the most successful poetry books, they've all been kind of dictated through the prize, aka guest judge selection process, right? So and sadly, but also fortunately, a lot of that old guard are retiring, are gone, right? So now we are in a more chaotic transitioning period, right? You no longer have to worry about, I don't know, Ray Armantrout picking your book, or picking your book over just picking another one of her students or some shit like that, right? You are in this period where both publisher and artist are no longer sure what exactly is they're looking for, what's acceptable. So you're pretty much freer in this moment than you were in 2017, right? Where your first book essentially needs to be some auto-fiction, autobiographical thing where you build this name brand that people can then follow past that point, right?
Sorry.
I think, yes, read widely what you said. nobody cares anymore about genre, which is nice. I think you have a lot more acceptance of that. The only thing I'll add to that is just, how do you do it? And I think you just have to listen to the voice that is ringing in your head for any particular story. And that could be, if you read widely, and if you love a breadth of literature, and if this voice is coming to you, and whether it's, my collection, that's a question that comes up a lot from people who've read it. You've got flash fiction, and you've got longer stories, and you've got magic realism, and it's just, and the voices vary so much. You've got very contemporary voices, and you've got mythological voices, but those are just the voices those stories came in, and that just felt true to the narrator. I think just channeling the narrator is what I do, and then you've got to follow that. And it doesn't matter where the story ends up or who accepts it, but it's going to be a good story if you channel your narrator, and then you see what you want to do with it.
I could not have said any of that better myself. Thank you. I will add, though, that I fully agree, and I see trends in books and what's popular and what's garnering attention change all the time. And I'm really glad that that kind of breaking down of what I saw a lot, too, of traditional story and traditional genre is going away and affording opportunities to writers like y'all, to writers like in this room, to put a story out that is truer to themselves. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I always answer this question with Bolivia's turkeys. There are no turkeys in Bolivia. I didn't know that when I was writing my first novel set in Bolivia. There's this scene where the father overturns the Thanksgiving table. I mean, Thanksgiving is such an American holiday. What was I thinking? First novel. Okay, so that's why it's a monster in a box. But I learned then that, you can kind of make your own rules. And if you're going to do something like historical research, you have to really be honoring your subject, especially if you're not of that particular community or part of the world. So like the author John Langan surprises me because he writes these incredibly detailed books, and then in his interviews he goes, "Oh, I know I'm going to be pronouncing this wrong." And it's like, what? He's never been there. You don't have a direct connection. He just researches it like really impeccably. So I think you can write about anything as long as you're writing from a place of respect and find something comparable. Like, and for instance, I may not understand, many subjectivities, but I could try my best to put myself in their shoes and try to imagine what the world might be like. And Tangerine's a good example. That movie by Sean Baker. He just did Honora, if anyone saw that. But Tangerine is about two trans sex workers, and he treated those characters with such compassion, and they were so fully realized that although he's not part of that world, it was honoring it. So I think you just have to be very, very careful, and the research needs to be impeccable.
I think I'll just add to that for me it depends on what it is that I don't know. I mean, factual research or even just the feel of a place or a street is pretty easy to research now. Thank you, ChatGPT. But I have, for certain stories, read 2 or 3 entire books set in that place because I needed to understand the world and the social dynamics that my character was making choices in. And in the end, it was just, it was just a short story, maybe part of a short story, but I needed to understand all of that. So I think it's a question of how much of the world you need to know and how deeply.
Thank y'all. Thank you.